Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Operation Gladio meets Secret Societies with War Hamster Brady. How are you today, Brady?
I'm better than I've been the last couple of weeks. My neck is getting better. I think I can make it through a whole session. If I get in too much pain, I'll go off camera and lay on the floor.
Just talk to me from there.
Sure. It's like when we were kids, you're talking on the phone all night long.
Laying in the hallway.
Exactly, with a 30-foot extension cord.
Yes.
Waiting
We
till
didn't ever have a 30-foot extension cord. We just had the short one, so we had to lay underneath the phone.
when they came out with those cordless phone with the wireless phones, that was like the greatest thing for teenagers ever. You could actually get privacy.
Yeah,
Well, shall we jump in?
absolutely.
So it's been a while, but if I seem to remember, we were talking about secret societies and its relationship to Operation Gladio, and how this whole shadow state global international syndicate rules the world through their connections.
Yep.
They've got their people in the oddest places in the connections in the financial world, espionage, diplomacy, government, business, you name it. Everywhere you look, there's like scrolling key or skull and bones. And they all went to the same grooming schools, and they all went to Yale and got tapped on the shoulder, and somehow ended up in some of the most amazing places. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome.
So when oops, that's the wrong one. We last left off. Let me do a screen share. I should do this ahead of time next time. We left off. We were in the 1930s. And you get me up there yet?
I don't have it here.
It says I'm sharing.
Oh, there it is down there. Okay.
Yeah, I was hiding. So we left off the 1930s with some gentlemen by the name of J. Peter Grace, who's one of our favorites. Peter Dominic, Sergeant Shriver, and and Cyrus Vance and his wonderful son, Cyrus Vance Jr. So then we get to the 1940s. That's where we're going to start today. 30s are interesting because these guys were in college in the 30s, which means they were the perfect age to be officers in World War II. These World War II guys were in college in the early 40s, so they were young enough to fight in World War II, but not necessarily in a senior rank. First guy we're going to talk, and that's important because a lot of this, everything World War II on has, been one giant goal, seeking this one world government, new world order. And, they did it through espionage, diplomacy, you name it. And we've been toppling regimes all over the world ever since towards that one goal. First guy we're going to talk about is a guy by the name of Robert Orr, and you can see on his bio, he eventually becomes the U.S. ambassador to Singapore, which is funny. We'll get to it, but just one of his connections. All these guys seems like they get ambassadorships, and that's really the point man for U.S. diplomacy in any foreign country. It seems these skull and bones, and especially scroll and key guys, go to some of the most, shall we say, strategic places in the world at the most strategic times. So why do we care about Mr. Robert D. Orr? In his wiki, he's described as an American politician and businessman. All right, move on. Nope, there's more to him. This guy's born in 1917 while his family's vacationing in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where my lovely wife is from. He actually grew up in Evansville, Indiana. Does that mean anything to you?
Yes. I mean, it's borderline Kentucky, but
yeah, big manufacturing area once upon a time. And of course, his father is an industrialist in many companies. The big flagship company was called the Orr Iron Company. So daddy's rich. And so Robert, little Bobby, decides to go to the Hotchkiss School in Connecticut in high school because, of course, he did.
Because he's going to get groomed.
Exactly. Goes to Yale. Gets tapped for Scroll and Bones. Scroll and Key. And then he goes off to Harvard Business School. Leaves Harvard when World War II breaks out to join the Army. Gets admitted to the Officers Candidate School, of course. These guys are always officers. And then he serves on, tell me if this is familiar, serves on the staff of the Quartermaster General's staff in the Pacific Theater.
Wow.
What's that? Yeah. What? Tell everyone what that position really is.
I mean, it's logistics, like Lyman Lemmesker.
And it's a bit of a gatekeeper position as well. So he rises to the rank of major and gets awarded. These guys always get medals. You got the Legion of Merit for pushing papers. While he's there, he meets his wife, a woman by the name of Joanne Josie Wallace, because she was in the Women's Air Force Pilots. Figured you might like that, woman in the Air Force.
Yep.
They married in 1944, and they would have 3 kids. Eventually, not all at once. Robert then goes back to Evansville and enters the family business. Gets involved in local Republican politics. Becomes involved in the local economics committee. And that's important. And he sits on all these civics boards. And this is how you make connections on a state level, sort of like these guys do it on a national level or international. It's the same thing. It's who you know. And he sits on the boards of things like the Rotary, YMCA, the Willard Library, the Buffalo Trace Council, Boy Scouts of America, and the Presbyterian Church of Evansville. So basically, he's one of those people who's networking everywhere he goes.
Yep.
Then he becomes the trustee of a place called Hanover College, where he was the trustee for decades. Hanover College is a small private school in Indiana, which was founded in 1827 by a guy by the name of John Finley Crowe. It's part of what's known as the Second Great Awakening, religious revival. It's not that impressive of a college, but there's a very interesting alumni from there by the name of Mike Pence.
It is a very prestigious college in Indiana.
Yeah, it's a small school, but the Mike Pence is there while Robert Orr was a trustee.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. So Pence would have might have an open invitation to certain meetings or introductions. So Orr continues to work his way up the local Republican Party ladder, gets elected to the Indiana State Senate from 1968 to 73, becomes a lieutenant governor from 72 to 81, and is known for tax reform. They kind of reorganized their entire tax structure, ended up lowering taxes. It's pretty popular. Popular enough because he becomes governor of Indiana from 1981 to 89.
Which is when I was living there.
He was your governor, huh?
Yes. Well, technically I was registered in Florida, but I was stationed at Grissom and then went to school at IU. Yeah.
So he gets done as governor, and he gets named as the U.S. ambassador to Singapore from 1989 to 92 by none other than Skull and Bones George W. Bush. What's going on in Singapore from 89 to 92?
Tell us.
They had what's that?
I said, go ahead and tell us.
It's actually a pretty boring area. Singapore's government was very authoritarian. It was very focused on meritocracy, anti-corruption, and rapid development. I was at a baseball camp around those years, and a couple of the kids at baseball camp were from Singapore. And they told us what it was like that you could get thrown in jail for a week for spitting on the sidewalk as a kid. You couldn't chew gum on the streets because they didn't want any gum on the streets. So it's a very disciplined society. And the government's really promoting what they call Asian values, emphasizing community, discipline, and hierarchy over Western individualism. It's supposed to be a counter to perceived liberal excesses elsewhere. This would be the far, in today's day, they'd be considered a far right government. And it was pretty successful.
That's where the American kid got caned for scratching somebody's car.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're pretty serious on there. And there's no crime in Singapore for a reason. They got a lot of economic growth during the period, but that's when this guy was there, or was there for all that. Nothing exciting happened. That's why I looked it up. I go, that's a little boring. Comes back and launches a consulting firm called Alliance for Global Commerce, which focuses on international trade and export issues. Is that globalist theme? And he's big on opening Indiana to Asian businesses. That's the globalism, folks, right there. Little side note on him: he would get divorced in the year 2000. The Alliance for Global Commerce didn't really grow to anything significant. It was a small little endeavor. He's pretty old by this point. He divorces in the year 2000, remarries again in 2001 at the age of 83, and then would die at 86. So, a little interesting. Wonder where the estate went.
Right.
But that's Mr. Robert Orr. He's interesting, not too special, but I thought he was worth mentioning.
Yep.
Fits some patterns. All right, let's get to the star of the show. Cord Meyer, class of 1943. See who he's pictured with?
Is that Mother Teresa?
That's Albert Einstein.
Oh, I can't see from here.
I
see. Yeah. I don't have my glasses on. Yeah, because Albert Einstein kind of, and of course, yeah, go ahead, because there's lots of connections here.
Yeah, we'll get to the Einstein part, but it was really hard. It was actually pretty hard to find a good picture of Cord Meyer, so I'd use the Einstein one. So why is he so special? Where do we start? He's born in 1920. Go ahead.
With his family.
Born in 1920 in Washington, D.C. His grandfather was Cord Meyer II. I said I've got him on this. This is Junior. He went by Junior, but he's actually the fourth Cord Meyer. His grandfather, Cord Meyer, was a leading figure of the Continental National Bank, and he sat on the board after that merged with Hanover National Bank. He would also be a director of merger of the Colonial Trust Company and the Trust Company of America, and we've talked about the Trust Company of America when we did Skull and Bones. Here's what gets interesting. Well, it gets interesting. It's already interesting with Cord Meyer. His grandfather, during the 1907 panic, was one of the bankers that went to J.P. Morgan's conference room where they devised what became the predecessor of the Federal Reserve Bank. What happened was a bunch of banks were failing in 1907, and the American dollar was an absolute panic. J.P. Morgan ends up bailing out all these banks with about 25, I think it was $1 million at the time. It might have been billion. But that's really what led to the meeting on Jekyll Island. And Cord Meyer II was there as part of that. This would lead into the real causes of World War I and how J.P. Morgan was the lender for almost the entire Lend-Lease program that kept Europe afloat during the early years of the war. That's what's going on here at this conference. I've gone into more detail on that elsewhere, and I can do that another time, but that's a really important data point for this guy to be in that meeting. Cord Meyer II would also serve on a lot of boards, and I'm just going to start naming them. We had the Home Insurance Company, Acme Fertilizer, Dick and Meyer Sugar Refineries. Highlight that one because the Colonel's going to talk about that. We had the Cord Meyer Development Company, the Lake Charles Rice Milling Company, Equitable Trust, Newtown Railway, because of course they're involved in railroads, Tennessee Coal and Iron Company, which would merge into U.S. Steel. When they put all these companies together to form U.S. Steel, it was J.P. Morgan that kind of brokered the deal for Carnegie. But that's how Carnegie got his liquidity. The law firm that put it together to create the first modern version of a limited liability company was none other than Sullivan and Cromwell.
Of course.
Yeah, this guy's part of that. Sold his company into that. That's a big data point. He was part of the Atlanta, Birmingham, and Railroad Company, St. Paul's Mining Company. He's very influential in the Democrat Party. These guys the parties don't mean so much to these scrolling key guys. They have to influence both. He would be so influential. He would actually be the chairman of the New York State Democratic Committee, and that means he was rubbing elbows with the FDR side of the Roosevelt dynasty and the rest of those Democrats. He'd be the World's Fair Commissioner, the Secretary of State. That's a big deal. Secretary of State for New York. He was always famous for his opposition to Randolph Hearst when he ran for governor. And of course, Cord II was a member of the New York Yacht Club and the New York Athletic Club. So why don't you jump in there and talk about great-grandfather?
Well, Cord Meyer the first immigrated to the United States from Germany, which I found very interesting. There's a lot of the Meyer family in Germany. And he's the one that created the Dicken Meyer sugar refinery. They got their sugar from Cuban plantations, which is a reoccurring theme of many of our Operation Gladio folks that got rich on sugar, to include William Polly. This business is the foundation of their original family fortune. It also expanded into rice milling in Louisiana. So,
Well,
yeah,
and that's why it's so interesting is the Cuba connection, because obviously when we get to Cord Meyer IV himself, he's got a vested
yeah,
financial interest in overthrowing Castro.
correct.
Yeah, so a little bit of a conflict of interest there, but who doesn't at
But
this point?
right, but understand that just for the researchers out there, this company still exists under the Meyer Cord Meyer Development, and owns a crap ton of real estate in Queens area of New York.
Yeah, so we're definitely talking about a blue blood family here.
A
New money.
dynasty.
Yeah, new money dynasty, without a doubt. All right. So Cord IV, he had a father as well. Wasn't all that special. He's described as a diplomat and a real estate developer. As a diplomat, he served in Sweden. Remember, I told you we're going to get a lot of Swedish connections going forward. Right. This is another one. So he also served in Cuba, where his family's sugar interests lie. I didn't get the year the father was in Cuba as a diplomat, but I should have looked that up. His mother, Cord IV's mother, was Catherine Blair Thaw, and she came from a wealthy Pennsylvania coal family. All right, so back to Cole Meyer himself. Think he went to a grooming school? Yeah, St. Paul's, right down the street here in New Hampshire. Joins the Marines on graduation from Yale in 1942, and he lost his left eye at the Battle of Guam. Interestingly, his twin brother died in Okinawa. So this guy was not a paper pusher. And here it gets fun. In 1945, he becomes the aide for a guy by the name of Harold Stassen for the United Nations Conference on International Organizations. What year do we say he was born? 1920?
Hold on a second. Yeah, but hold on a second. They actually attended a private school in Switzerland and St. Paul's School.
I didn't get the Switzerland. Yeah, I missed the Switzerland part.
Yeah.
Okay. So after the war, he's 25 years old. He's an aide to Harold Stassen for the United Nations Conference on International Organizations. Who's Harold Stassen? He's an interesting guy. He had been the Minnesota governor from 1939 to 43. He was a big pusher to get the U.S. into World War II. He was an interventionist, so FDR loved him. And of course, when war breaks out he re-enlists. Is that the right word? Uh, Immediately
No,
joins the staff. What's the term?
yeah,
Yeah.
officers don't reenlist.
Okay. Well, he immediately joins the staff of Admiral Halsey. So this is this guy, Stassen. He was actually considered a Republican potential presidential favorite in 1948, but Dewey beat him out. When Dewey and he were running for the Republican primary, that was the first presidential debate ever recorded for the public. And that entire debate was over the criminalization of the Communist Party in the United States. So he's the president of Pennsylvania University, Ivy League, from 1948 to 53. Becomes the first director of the United States Foreign Operations Administration. So this is the guy leading a UN conference with our boy Cord Meyer at his side, and he's opening up these international foreign operations administrations. He then moves to something called he becomes the director of something called the Mutual Security Agency. You familiar with that one?
Yes, it's basically it functions just like USAID.
Yeah, it was kind of like a sister to the Marshall Plan. Its
Yeah,
alleged purpose was to strengthen the European allies through military assistance and economic recovery.
yeah.
Right.
It basically served as like an intelligence front.
Yeah, we talked about it before because the guy who was the director of it before him was none other than William Averill Harriman,
Yeah,
Skull and Bones.
yeah.
All right, so let's get back to Cord Meyer, but that's who he's rubbing elbows with, and that's how he's getting all his international connections. So 1947, he becomes the president of something called the United World Federalists. Now, we've talked about that before. This is basically supposed to be a grassroots level membership organization working towards, stop me if you've heard this, establishment of a world government.
Yep.
Presumably, it's to avoid atomic wars. And because that is their little flagship statement, a guy by the name of Albert Einstein joins as a member of the advisory board in 1948. And Einstein would write a letter in 1951 to Harrison Brown where he described the United World Federalists as the group nearest to our aspirations, which is, once again, one world government.
And why is that important from the Gladio perspective? Because eventually the Albert Einstein Institute gets created by Gene Sharp, and they're the ones behind teaching all of these grassroots people the street tactics for overthrowing their government.
Exactly. And Cord Meyer's there on day one and as leading this organization. It's like one of the first NGOs, right?
Yeah.
Um, the World Constitutional Convention is something they always strive for. This whole organization eventually would fade into obscurity, but it really just kind of got sucked into other agencies and other organizations. The original ambitions are still intact to this very day.
Correct.
If you want to look into like really where it went to, it's something now called the Citizens for Global Solutions. You may as well just call it the World Economic Forum for citizens. All right, back to Cord. But that's where that's where his heart is one world government. 1949, he joins an organization called the Central Intelligence Agency at the invitation of none other than Allen Dulles. He starts out at the Offices of Policy Coordination under a guy by the name of Frank Wisner.
And when he was initially approached by Allen Dulles, he was not even allowed to know the name of the program that he was going to be working for. It was one of those trust me, bro moments.
And he trusted. But you got to think about this. He's 29 years old and he's rubbing elbows with these people that are running the world.
Yes.
Okay, it was an interesting side note. In 1953, the FBI went after him and tried to deny his security clearance because he'd been on a podium with some notorious leftist. We're, this is we're still on the McCarthyism, anti-communist thing going on right there. Of course, the CIA does an inquiry and dismisses the claims. We've investigated ourselves and found we've done nothing wrong. Okay. He becomes really good friends by another one of our heroes by the name of James Jesus Angleton. 54, Angleton, of course, becomes the CIA's counter intel chief. And Meyer leads what's called the International Organizations Division.
And what are they notorious for?
Tell us, Colonel.
Operation Mockingbird.
That's where we're going now. Yeah, let's jump in Operation Mockingbird. Hang on. I got to pull up some notes. Everybody knows what Operation Mockingbird is. Especially Mockingbird media. People say it's fake, but it's not. And we're going to prove it's not.
But can we go back and just do a little bit about his wife, Mary? Because where she worked prior to this is very important to the story.
Do you want to circle back on that one, or you want to do it now? Because I'm going to close. I was going to close with Mary.
Okay. Well, I just want to keep people abreast of your timeline. So they get married in 1945, right after the war. The date they got married is April 19th. And the reason why that struck out at me, number one, it's my birthday. But number two, that's a notorious event for really bad shit to happen. Really bad stuff like Waco and Oklahoma bombing and stuff like that. So that jumped out at me right away. So she is a journalist and she was working for the North American Newspaper Alliance during this whole time that this is going on. She then becomes an editor for the Atlantic Monthly. So she's part of this whole operation that he's going to go be in charge of in the CIA. She's part of it. And I just found that incredibly interesting.
That is. And there's more about Mary. We will close with her.
Okay.
So what is Operation Mockingbird? It's basically the CIA planting stories in media around the world and in the United States. Colonel, is the CIA allowed to operate in the United States domestically?
No, they're not.
Well, it's a good thing Operation Mockingbird's fake, isn't it? So they're pumping stories to twist the public perception in news, films, magazines, journals. They create fake news agencies to plan a story that the rest of the newspapers will pick up and run with. It's basically the Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, all that stuff, but directly in the media here in America as well. Korean War, you got Radio Free Press Asia. Life and like CBS would pick up a story. They're involved in Guatemala, that coup. This is real, people. They can tell you it's not. Mockingbird isn't real, but we're about to prove that it is. So we first find out about it in 1973 when CIA Director William Colby shares some information with journalists. Here we are in the early 70s. We got all kinds of CIA scandals coming out. And in 1974, there's a New York Times article by Seymour Hersh that discloses something called Operation Chaos, or Chaos, which is a CIA program initiated in 1967 that amassed files on over 300,000 American citizens. Wait, we're not supposed to operate in America, are we? And conducted warrantless domestic surveillance against anti-war dissidents, violating the agency's charter prohibiting operations within the United States.
And did anybody go to jail for that?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, they did not.
So this would, of course, launch some investigations. You had the Church Committee in 1975. And there's a lot of good. You've talked about the Church Committee a lot. But there's also a committee called the Pike Committee.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about the church committee for a second, I'm going to go off camera and just stretch this neck for a second, and
Okay.
I'll be listening.
Okay. So I want to go back just a little bit and name some names here. So it was discovered during both the Pike Commission and the Church Commission that people like Philip Graham of the Washington Post had been recruited by Frank Wisner almost immediately, like back in 1948. Along with we've covered this extensively on my show. Stuart Alsop and Joseph Alsop was part of it. Basically, they had this thing that was notionally called the Georgetown set. And it was everybody that was in Washington, D.C., and primarily in the media, where they had all of these social events like dinners in people's backyards and barbecues and stuff like that. And that's where a lot of their networking, they would go to dinner. And that's where a lot of this information was shared. And it was disclosed during the commissions and committee meetings that as many as 300 different newspapers were part of Operation Mockingbird. And I'll just name a few of them because it's not even the ones that you think. New York Herald Tribune, Newsweek, New York Times, Time Magazine, Washington Post, New York Daily Mirror, Chicago Daily News, Miami News, New York Herald Tribune, Washington Star, Miami News, and the Chattanooga Times. So this was a very wide network in the United States and not just the primary papers that you normally associate with it. And of course, you notice there's several Miami papers, and that's because the largest CIA station in the United States was in Miami.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of Cubans there too. And Cord Meyer's got the Cuban connection.
Yes.
And I neglected to say, if we made a Mount Rushmore of the all-time CIA bad guys, Cord Meyer is on that Mount Rushmore as an anti-hero, without a doubt.
Yes.
So this guy's a big deal. So again, one of the funny things about Operation Mockingbird, it gets exposed a few different ways, and we're talking about that right now, but it never got shut down, ever. It's still going to this day. So let's prove that it exists. Let me talk about the Pike Committee a little bit, because the Pike Committee's final report, which was completed in '76, was never officially published because the House voted against its release. Tell me if you heard this before. There's objections on classification grounds. It was focusing on intelligence failures, wasteful spending, executive overreach, and withholding information from Congress. Its investigations revealed that the foreign intelligence budget was 3 to 4 times larger than Congress had been informed, with significant funds misallocated or wasted on ineffective programs alongside agency shortcomings, such as failing to anticipate the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Talk about poor human influence, poor recruitment in the Soviet Union, mishandling operations like the Bay of Pigs. Committee also probed controversial activities, including CIA assassination plots against foreign leaders and illegal domestic spying by the FBI and CIA though agency officials contested the committee's interpretations as overly simplistic and damaging to national security. Tell me if you've ever heard that before.
Well, and the CIA would not even release the list of journalists that they had on their payroll to the commission.
So that report.
So who's in charge? Who's in charge?
Pike.
No,
Senator
I'm
Pike.
saying who's in charge of the CIA? If the CIA can get away with not releasing the information to Congress, who has oversight?
There is no oversight, especially when they control their own budget. That's one of the things that paragraph I was reading said, that, misallocation of funds, misallocation, my white ass. It's just going to, things they can't tell you where it's going to. Well, we don't have that report. It was never released. But what we do have is this recording. And I'm going to play some snippets here. And you tell me if you think that Operation Mockingbird is real or not.
Where did you go? I think he hit the wrong button because I lost him. Where did you go?
It was a fun ride. Like I got kicked out of your spaces yesterday. I just hit the wrong button. All right,
Okay.
I'll share this screen. What you have here is the House Select Committee on Intelligence, known as the Pike Committee, called the CIA and the media, also Operation Mockingbird. Testifying in a bit will be none other than DCI William Colby. I'm going to play a few snippets. Make sure, tell me you can hear it. Could you hear that?
No.
I got to stop the share and do it again. Share volume. Sorry about that, people.
Yeah, this is the part I suck at too.
All right, give me 1 second. I've got to do it someplace else.
So while he's bringing that up, I did want to also mention that a couple of the other names, Copley News Services, Louisville Courier Journal, New York Post, and obviously Life and Time Magazine, and the entire network of CBS was part of this. And the reason why they had the disconnect in the funds is because the Pike Commission was unaware that Wisner had secret access to the Marshall Plan funds. And they had a carve out in the Marshall Plan funds that was not known by Congress of millions of dollars that they were spending on these types of programs. All right, let me get that back up there.
All right. This is just an amazing hour-long deposition, but I'm going to play a few snippets.
For years, the CIA waged a media campaign in Europe to combat communist propaganda. Arthur Cox, a former CIA operative whom we talked to this week, called it fighting fire with fire. And as an illustration, he referred to Portugal today, to the Portuguese press. And he said, imagine a story appearing singing the praises of a left-wing political figure there. Presumably, says Cox, it's a puff piece planted by the Russians to promote one of their favorites. We answer back with a counter story describing the same guy as a villain and a scoundrel. This kind of competition in the newspapers requires extensive payments to European reporters, and in some cases, the CIA actually created or sustained whole news organizations. As you heard Stu Lurie say in his talk, the CIA bought part ownership of an Italian paper, the Daily American, paying between $80,000 and $90,000 to keep the paper printing stories that support the American interests in the Mediterranean. And a few weeks ago, a British magazine, Time Out, discovered in a PhD thesis out of Oxford evidence that the CIA created a British news organization called Forum World Features. It's a Delaware corporation owned on the record from 1966 to 1973 by John Hay Whitney.
Who?
Oh, isn't he one of our Skull and Bones guys?
Oh, the Whitney family pops up everywhere, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. When I was listening to this, getting ready for this show, I had to stop right there and listen to that again. I go, did I just hear what I thought I heard?
You did, Tweety Bird.
Yeah. For those who don't know, the Whitney family they're pretty much about as blue blood in America as it gets. This is old money, and they are littered throughout this entire story. Whitneys show up almost every week, some way, shape, or form. But that was an interesting one. Sorry, I got to turn my phone off. All right, let's get to the next snippet. I've got about 4 of these to play, and they're absolutely worth it. When I play this next one, I'd like everyone to contrast the way both Republicans and Democrats speak to the CIA officers and stuff like that, and it's polite, it's respectful, and then contrast it with this crap we just saw with Pam Bondi the other day. I mean, the levels of depravity that our Congress has sunk to in this day and age compared to what they were like 50 years ago, it's disgusting, to be quite honest. All right, next.
Well, I think most of the politicians were put in office by the CIA, so they had to be nice to them.
I don't know if it was that bad back then, but there definitely were a few. All right. Now we're going to have Director Colby himself speaking.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you for the remarks. Mr. Chairman, CIA personnel, when they go overseas, obviously must go under some other title. This is, in some cases, a title of another agency of the government. In some cases, it is some other title outside of the government. For reasons of continuity, CIA personnel sometimes have to retain that identification while they serve a tour within the United States.
Wait, serving a tour within the United States?
Yes.
Undercover? He's admitting
Yeah.
this in front of Congress, and that's absolutely outside their charter?
And keep in mind that identity would include U.S. military, corporations, government agencies.
State Department.
Yes.
We talk about, these different stations, CIA, embassies and stuff like that. Half the people are CIA, depending on where you are.
Correct.
And he's just admitting it right there. Let me continue a little further with this.
Is a headquarters tour, and they are not using that cover for another reason during that period, but merely to provide some continuity. There are certain activities that we have done within the United States that do need some other identification than CIA.
He just admitted it.
There's some things we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, they should have pulled the CIA's charter right that day.
Yes.
Previous occasions, the need for covering a security investigation so that it does not highlight the fact that the person being investigated will shortly become a member of the CIA, because we do not want that reputation to be around. But
we don't want the reputation, but we do it.
I think you have asked two particular areas be covered, Mr. Chairman. One, the subject of details to other government agency, as distinct from the use of other agencies cover. And secondly, the relationship with the field of journalism generally in our operations. With respect to the last part of that, the journalist area, Mr. Chairman, I obviously cannot go into detail as to the identifications or the people involved, but I think I can sketch a few general points here within which we can go into full detail in the executive session. In the first place, as people equally interested in foreign affairs, CIA people and journalists frequently run into each other and exchange ideas. This occurs both abroad, in our stations abroad, and in the United States. In the past year, for example, CIA has received in our building for discussions of foreign events about 100 journalists for a detailed discussion and analysis of some foreign situation. In that time, we have answered something like 12 or 1,300 telephone inquiries from journalists about some development abroad, some foreign development, on which the journalist is seeking the advice and the judgments of our analysts about that situation. I think this is...
Yeah, we're going to give you our objective opinion, or we're going to give the opinion we want you to spread as disinformation. Could it be any more obvious? All right, no. That's just full confession. Let me get to the next one. This is interesting.
Beyond that, Mr. Chairman, we have over the years had an operational relationship with a certain number of journalists overseas. We have worked with these people to help us on our foreign intelligence responsibilities. In some cases, they can provide us information that we ask them about. In some cases, they can make contacts with people that it is difficult for an official of an embassy or an American mission abroad to be in touch with. And for this reason, we have on occasion used people who have connections with journalism for this purpose. Under our own restraints, we have been very careful about this, and in recent years we have even further strengthened our restrictions on this matter. We have taken particular caution to ensure that our operations are focused abroad and are not
bullshit.
Focused at the United States in the sense of collecting information about the United States, or, on the other hand, influencing the opinion of the American people about things that from a CIA point of view. We have dropped contacts and relationships with journalists and others in the past couple of years, where we felt that there was some belief that that relationship could be construed as an effort to influence a major circulation American journal, for example.
Boy, I can tell you the BS is flowing off my screen on that one.
Yeah, so just for the audience knowledge, they plant stories in foreign papers so the American papers can pick them up on purpose.
Yeah, they even stopped doing that to some degree, just because they could just go straight to the Washington Post or New York Times now. You know, people like Fusion Ken Delanian, these people, it's a direct line to the CIA.
Well, they always did that, but it's like an echo chamber. Yeah, so they will plant the same types of stories in foreign newspapers, magazines, whatever, and then they cue in the people here to use that as a source when it's all coming from the same place.
Yeah, and that's the whole circle jerk thing about it. And say, look, the news is reporting on it. We've got to take action, even though you planted the story in the first place.
Correct.
It's basically it's the whole idea behind a false flag. It's exactly what they're doing. All right, a couple more we want to listen to. This one's about detailing to other agencies, which I thought was interesting.
Of our employees to other agencies. The detail of agency personnel is approved when the assignment is determined to be beneficial to the career development of an individual, or where it can make a contribution to a foreign intelligence-related activity. Employees on such details normally continue to receive their agency entitlements during such a detail. In a sense, I was one of those at one time, Mr. Chairman, when I left the agency on leave without pay and served in the Agency for International Development and the Department of State when I was in Vietnam, and then later returned to the agency. I was not under a cover at that time. I was a detail. Reimbursement to CIA for such details depends upon the individual.
You want to hear that again?
Oh, no. He said he was working for USAID while he was on the payroll of the CIA.
Exactly.
As a detail.
Yeah, but USAID is all about helping children not starve, right?
Yes, and giving condoms to Africans.
Which is important. All right, that was pretty good. Let me get the last one. It's worth listening to. So remember, people, Operation Mockingbird never happened. They keep telling us.
Now, I'm going to withdraw that. Do you now have people who are being paid by the CIA on anything which you referred to as a major circulation American journal? We have no staff members of any such major journal. That was not the question. The question was, do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to anything which you called, quote, a major circulation American journal? Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do. We have some who are in the category of freelancer or stringer or something of that nature abroad. Individuals who are not considered a part of the staff of that journal. I'm not going to ask you the names or the numbers. I am going to ask you this, however. Do you have any people who are on the staffs of major circulation American journals who are contributing to major circulation American journals, who you are paying without the knowledge of the management of the major circulation American journals? Yes, we do. Stringers who are submitting occasional pieces.
There you have it.
Yes. Yes, we do.
But they're still denying it exists every time we talk about the Mockingbird media.
So you mentioned the fact that they were involved in Guatemala. And I want to just specifically say, because I was just asked this on an earlier podcast this morning, the way they were working in Guatemala was not just in Guatemala media, but they also had this entire collective of the people that I had mentioned earlier that were basically ordered not to cover what was actually happening in Guatemala. As a matter of fact, they put out edicts to the State Department that disallowed independent journalists travel to that entire region during that operation.
And here's our boy Cord Meyer running the whole damn show.
He was.
All right. The story got a little bit more sunlight thrown on it, or daylight, I guess. There's a woman named Deborah Davis who wrote the biography of Catherine Graham. Who's Catherine Graham? She's the owner of the Washington Post. Pay attention, people. The name of the book was called Catherine the Great. She exposed Mockingbird to a high degree there. In 1977, in Rolling Stone magazine, there's an article written by Carl Bernstein called The CIA and the Media. Who's Carl Bernstein?
The Watergate co-author.
At the Washington Post, Woodward and Bernstein, who basically were getting all the deep throat information fed to them, so they could take down Nixon. And what did we just find out in those recently released 6 pages about who actually took down Nixon? Yeah, it was the military-industrial complex. Have you gone into that yet? That recent release?
Not in detail. I'm still going through it.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. I mean, we kind of knew that, but to actually have it out there in the public, it's pretty cool. But that was Bernstein that also in 1977 put more daylight on this.
And can we spend a minute with their influence during using Mockingbird in Hollywood?
Sure.
So Frank Wisner recruited via Cord Meyer, recruited a whole bunch of media people in Hollywood. For example, former OSS filmmaker John Ford and studio bosses Cecil DeMille, who was at Paramount Pictures, and Daryl Zanuck at 20th Century Fox were some of these people. Another important figure was Howard Hughes. He owned RKO Pictures. As Charles Higman points out in Howard Hughes' The Secret Life, which was written or published in 2004, Howard Hughes was quoted as saying, this is a good match for his business, because what business was Howard Hughes in? The military-industrial complex. He was an aircraft manufacturer. And so he owns a movie studio, and he glorifies the CIA while they're creating war zones overseas for his production of his aircraft. another very important figure that we have to talk about in the Mockingbird is C.D. Jackson. He too was a member of the OSS, and he was also in charge, deputy chief of the Psychological Warfare Division of SHAPE, which eventually morphs into NATO. And after the war, he became the managing director of Time Life International. And he was instrumental in Operation Mockingbird. It was revealed after the death of Jackson, Mrs. C.D. Jackson gave her husband's papers to the Dwight D. Eisenhower Library. And it includes details that Jackson was in contact with a CIA agent in Hollywood's Paramount Studios. He didn't identify who it was, but one author who wrote Who Paid the Piper said that it was Carlton Ossop, a CIA agent employed by Frank Wisner. There's some other people's opinions on who that was, but the fact that they were pervasive through Hollywood is very important. And why is that important? Because where's Ronald Reagan from? Hollywood.
Screen
Right?
Actors Guild. Screen Actors Guild, and he was the president of the Screen Actors Guild, and the Screen Actors Guild was run by the Cleveland Mafia.
Yes. Okay. Did you know that the CIA was behind the production of the Animal Farm movie?
I did not know that.
They were. And because in the actual book, Animal Farm, it basically indicts capitalism and communism. So they changed it. It was actually animated and filmed in England, Britain. And so they wanted them to go soft on the critique of capitalism. So the actual movie that was produced by Hollywood altered the book a little bit. And one of the it wasn't like, it didn't make major news, of course, because they control the news. But there was a book written called The Quiet American, which was damning of the CIA in Vietnam. And they basically took creative liberties with this man's work, even though the movie said that it was based on his work. And he was furious when the movie came out, because basically what the CIA had done is crafted and basically deleted out their involvement in the nefarious activities during Vietnam, in the portrayal of what was supposed to be based on this man's work. So everything, and I said this earlier in this other podcast, basically, if you think about this, the same people that were involved in psychological operations during World War II go into the CIA and they psychologically warfared the American people, both with the media, Hollywood, the entire thing. Our entire world is a hologram. It's fake. It's based on some orchestrated plan to control us through the use of information warfare.
For what purpose? Oh, maybe to create their new world order, one world government?
Absolutely.
Remember, that's what this Cord Meyer has always been about, one world government. That's been his vision from day one. And that's what he's doing. You wonder why so many people around the world have bought into this socialist utopian theory.
So I wanted to make one more comment about how nefarious this is. And it's relating to JFK's death, since that's all been in the news more recently. A few hours after JFK was killed, one of the newspaper people, Hal Hendrick, who was at Scripps Howard News Service, he provided background information to a colleague, Seth Cantor, about Lee Harvey Oswald. it included details of his defection to the Soviet Union and his work for Fair Play for Cuba Committee. This surprised Cantor because he had this information before it was even discussed by the FBI later that day.
Good stuff. All right, just so to put the record straight, they are still to this day saying Mockingbird didn't happen. In a 2019 book, 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, a guy by the name of David P. Hadley writes a book called The Rising Clamor: The American Press, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the Cold War. And this is a direct quote, okay? He writes that, in quotes, continued lack of specific details provided by the Church Committee and Bernstein's expose proved a breeding ground for some outlandish claims regarding CIA and the press. He mentioned that Davis provided no information on her sources for her 1979 biography of Katharine Graham, and that the Church Committee and other investigations that followed it did not reveal an operation as described by Davis. I just gave you the damn confession at the other committee. According to Hadley, Mockingbird, as described by Davis, has remained a stubbornly persistent theory, and added the Davis Mockingbird theory that the CIA operated a deliberate and systemic program of a widespread manipulation of U.S. media does not appear to be grounded in reality, even though we've got the confession.
From the CIA director.
Yes. But that should not disguise the active role the CIA played in influencing domestic press's output.
Okay, so they were doing it. It just doesn't really have a name.
He just admitted it. You know, we just played the darn Pike Committee testimony.
But he was very careful in his manipulated statement by just naming the Church Committee.
Yeah, it's plausible denying it. Yeah, exactly. Didn't talk about the Pike Committee. Where the director actually came out and confessed that this was going on, run by Cord Meyer from Scroll and Key. Fits all the damn patterns they're trying to pretend it doesn't exist.
And did you know that C.D. Jackson negotiated Marina Oswald's exclusive rights to her story and that it was never published?
Of course not. All right. Let's get back to the rest of Cord Meyer's career, because there's some more fun stuff here. 62 to 67, he leads the Covert Action Staff of the Directorate of Plans. What is that, Colonel?
That's overthrowing other governments.
Why don't they just call it that? 67 to 73. This is during the Vietnam War, of course. Cord Meyer is the Assistant Deputy Director of Plans under a gentleman by the name of Thomas Karamessinis. That's a Greek name. I think I spelled it right, or pronounced it right. You familiar with Karamessinis? I would believe.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, Karamessinis is a really interesting guy. He was went to Columbia University and grad school. Remember, CIA loves to recruit from Columbia too. But his background gets fun because he was a lawyer who was the deputy district attorney under a guy by the name of Thomas Dewey from 1941 to 42. Guess who they prosecuted those years? That was right after Lucky Luciano got prosecuted by Dewey. So that's Karamessinis' background. During World War II, he's in the OSS, of all things, in World War II because he spoke Greek. Helps having another language. Gets the CIA's in charge of things like piano solo. What's piano solo, Colonel?
So part of Operation Gladio.
The original Operation Gladio in Italy. This guy's there. Yeah. He's also part of Project Foobelt. What's Operation Foobelt? Going after Chile's President Allende.
Yep.
And of course, Cord Meyer is involved in all that, and he leads the Operation Chaos, also known as MH Chaos, which was the covert domestic surveillance and espionage program which targeted American citizens involved in domestic protest movements. Sound familiar?
January 6th.
Yeah, that's Cord Meyer, people. They maintain files on over 7,200 individuals. They had computer indexes on 300,000 citizens and over 1,000 organizations. This gets exposed in 1974 when Seymour Hersh, boy, I'll tell you what, the guy gets around, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
He writes in the New York Times, here's the title of the paper, of the article. It says, huge CIA operation reported in the United States against anti-war forces and other dissidents in the Nixon years. You can read about this in Chapter 11 of the Rockefeller Commission. What's the Rockefeller Commission, Colonel?
It was another cover-up job that was named after Nelson Rockefeller, who was the vice president at the time. And one of the members of the Rockefeller Commission was none other than Lyman Lemonsker.
Thank you. And Cord Meyer's involved. That's the second confession that CIA is operating domestically in the United States outside of their charter, and we didn't disband them altogether. How does that happen? You are spying actively on American citizens, and you've been caught red-handed. You are pumping propaganda through Operation Mockingbird and trying to brainwash the American people to change our foreign policy and domestic. How is that not the crime of the century? And how are they allowed to exist? And have they ever stopped?
And nothing was ever done to Cord Meyer, so nothing stopped.
Well, MC Chaos apparently did stop. And it fueled this big call for reform. So here's how feckless your Congress is. That reform was the FISA Act of 1978, which is since used to spy on American citizens. So nice reform, Congress. You had all the information you needed to shut these mother down, and you just gave them a whole new conduit, the FISA Act. And that's
we just codified it into law to protect them.
Which we just renewed.
And we keep renewing it.
Yeah. We have a Republican president, House and Senate, and they renewed the FISA that was used to try to take down a Republican president. And
yes.
Yeah. So all this stuff's going down in 1973, and where does Cord Meyer go? Well, they pack him off overseas to become the CIA station chief in London. Why do they do that? Because they don't want him testifying in front of Congress. Sorry, he's busy overseas. We'll send someone else in.
Do you see a line I's note? Seymour Hersh's Kissinger book notes that Karamessinas met with McCord, the CIA Watergate burglar.
No, I didn't get that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I have not read that book, Alana. I may have to check it out. Sorry, the filth coming out of this episode is just, I think it's the worst one we've done. There's a lot of people that thought the Cord Meyer was deep throat. That turned out not to be the case. So let's go back in time. Talk about the JFK assassination, because this was after E. Howard Hunt's death. His two sons revealed that their father had recorded several claims about the assassination. In 2007, once again, the Rolling Stone, St. John Hunt, son of E. Howard Hunt, detailed the individuals who were implicated by his father in the JFK assassination. He names E. Howard Hunt, Cord Meyer, LBJ, David Sanchez Morales, David Phillips, Frank Sturgis, Lycian Sarti, and William Harvey. And we know all these names.
Yes, we do.
Of course, the LA Times examines that material and found it inconclusive. That's your boy, Cord Meyer.
So, did you run across the quote of Cord Meyer on his deathbed?
No, I did not get that.
Okay. He was interviewed, and he said, when asked about the murder of his wife and who had committed such a heinous crime, his exact quote was the same son of a bitches that killed JFK.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it up with his wife, because she's a fun story.
Okay.
His wife is Mary Pinchot, Pinchot, who's the second daughter of Amos Pinchot and Ruth Pickering Pinchot. We've seen the Pickering family before in Skull and Bones. Amos Pinchot went to St. Paul's School, right down the road, and was a member of Skull and Bones. After Cord Meyer divorces Mary in 1958, Mary had a very public and famous romantic relationship with none other than JFK.
We're told that by the same Mockingbird media.
Okay. Tabloids were all over it. I don't, I'm assuming it's true. And JFK is murdered in 63. Mary gets murdered walking down the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal towpath in Washington, D.C. in October of 1964. The suspect, Ray Crump Jr., was acquitted. Sort of like who killed Seth Rich. Pretty similar.
Well, yeah, this guy did not kill her.
No,
This was a professional hit job.
Yeah. And the question is why? Well, here's kind of a fun story here. Mary had a brother-in-law by the name of Benjamin Bradley. Who's Benjamin Bradley? Oh, he was the executive editor at the Washington Post during the Watergate investigation, overseeing Woodward and Bernstein. But before that, Bradley and his wife, Mary's sister, had caught a gentleman breaking into Pinchot's residence, apparently looking for her diary that contained the details of the JFK affair. Who's that guy who broke in? None other than James Jesus Angleton.
So this is why I have a lot of doubt about that reason was given to us by the same people that are part of Mockingbird Media. I don't think that's why they, because she's involved in all of this. And that's why I wanted to highlight her involvement. You just mentioned her family's involvement. She comes from the same line of family. She knows a lot of these secrets, and a lot of the accusations about why, because those accusations come out around the time of her murder. Well, the CIA has her diary. She recorded a lot of stuff because she was participating in the same activities that Cord Meyer was as a journalist. And so I now suspect that a lot of emphasis was placed on that as the alibi for that James Jesus Angleton taking her diary after her murder. But I do not believe, I'm very wary of believing anything that we've ever heard written about any of this.
Yeah, you're making the connection that I was hinting at, and I'm glad you did that. So we've got Mary, her sister married to Benjamin Bradley, the editor of the Washington Post, who's managing Woodward and Bernstein as the Watergate scandal's going in. We know Watergate scandal is run by the military-industrial complex and, of course, the CIA, because they got the similar goals of the one world government. And guess who's involved in every single bit of it? So that's the connection. He's brought it all a full circle. Yeah. And of course, Operation Mockingbird, of course they were working with the Washington Post the entire freaking time.
Yeah, so I'm now very doubtful about a lot of the allegations that were made during that time, because the CIA was at war with JFK.
Yeah, at that point they were. And anyway, I thought that the patterns of the connections are all there. We'll never know 100% of the truth on this stuff, but I think we can put a lot of the pieces together at this point. Cord Meyer would retire from the CIA in 1977. He'd become what else but a syndicated columnist. So did he really retire? And he would write a book in 1980 called Facing Reality: From World Federalism to the CIA. And of course, you've already read his epitaph.
Yeah. But I think it carries a lot of weight when he says the same people murdered his wife that murdered JFK. Yeah.
I mean, that is one heck of a story, one heck of a life he's lived. You think about, what do we just go through with Cord Meyer, from coming from a very wealthy, new money family, four generations deep. Goes to a grooming school, scroll and key, knows all the right people, gets immediately elevated to be like the second hand of all these very influential people in World War II, and right after, immediately goes into the CIA, becomes the number two of some of the biggest arch villains in history, and pretty much single-handedly runs some of the most dastardly disinformation, misinformation operations on the American people in history. And he's involved in everything from Watergate to JFK's assassination. One man. Interesting guy, huh?
Yeah.
Think he belongs on the Mount Rushmore of supervillains?
Yes.
All right. Well, that's all I've got. I know we could go on this topic for a long time. I'm going to title this on my.
Yeah. No, I think we've covered the highlights of it.
The 50 patterns we've been talking about for the last 3 years.
Every single one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking forward to this episode. So I was bummed I couldn't make it last week. But it was good stuff. We'll continue with the 1940s next week, and we might be able to get through a few decades pretty fast, because I think we've pretty much made our point pretty good. But there's a couple of other interesting people that are worth spending some time on. So we'll get to that.
So we'll probably close up Scroll and Key next week.
With pretty decent chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care.
Cheers, everyone.